Welcome to another Coffee with Samso, where we speak with ASX companies and their leaders who run and manage the show. Today we're back at the UWA Club here in Crawley. I'm here with Doug Grewar from Emu Limited. The code is EMU. Doug, welcome to Coffee with Samso, your very first time.
Yes, thanks, Noel.
Look, Doug, I've gone through your stuff, and look, I'm as an exploration sort of kind of geo. I like this kind of stuff where it hasn't really happened. You know, your market cap's about 8 million as we speak. But you got some really interesting projects that I would love to discuss with yourself. But maybe just give us an intro of where Emu is, where it's come from, and a bit about yourself.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Noel. Look, Emu in the last 4 years, before we returned and regrouped in Western Australia, was exploring in the high Andes and the Maricunga in Chile on about 4,500 metres, a difficult exploration area, but we were looking for gold up there. We had some moderate success, which kept us there for the 4 years, and we couldn't repeat that success. We explored extensively there, and it was the land of giants, of course, but we decided that given the sovereign risk changes there in Chile with the political situation, and also with the emergence of COVID-19 about the same time, that we needed to come back and get closer to our office here in Perth. And we were fortunate being one of the early companies to do that, because I think there were a number that would have done this, had the same vision. We were fortunate enough to secure 4 really prospective projects in the Wheatbelt and in close proximity to our West Perth office. So yeah, that's pretty much in the story why we're here. We looked at over 70 projects globally before we had before we actually arrived back in WA. So our project generation was extensive. We've spent a lot of time overseas since we were founded in 2008, and but in the last 2 years, 18 months, we've been back here in WA and been working hard on a discovery mainly in the southwest Grattan and out in Menzies in the goldfields. Okay,
look, you know, I've looked at your stuff. I mean, your Badja project in Yalgoo. You know, you made an announcement recently about tungsten intercepts. And those numbers, I mean, a lot of people may not sort of realise, but those numbers are quite high. They're almost mine grade kind of grade. And then as I looked into your announcement and stuff, it was associated with pretty decent numbers of gold. That must be something different, because you guys have done a lot in Badja. I think you've done almost 18,000 metres of drilling. An extensive array of soils as well. So yeah, maybe give us a good sort of understanding of where that sits in the portfolio.
Yeah, sure. So Badja's the one we have been doing most of our work since we came back in from the Andes. Originally our focus was very much on the Now's Nest historic mine, which was mined from 1910 to 1940. When we purchased that, or had the acquisition of the Now's Nest project, as it was called then, now called Badja, we did change the name. The mine had a 13,400 ounces, 1,000 ounces of gold in JORC resource, and we were interested in looking at developing strike and depth extensions on that mine. Because the previous owners had only drilled shallow, so we were quite excited about that. And it had graded 22 grams per tonne historically in the historic mine, which only ended in 1940 because of issues with labour and for a lot of water, that they were having water problems. 1940, of course, was the Second World War. Finding labour was difficult, so hadn't really been touched and explored much since then. So we were quite buoyed by the opportunity that provided. We've also, along with the drilling, the RC drilling programs we've put in there, and the soil geochem work, we have also done some IP, some geophysics there as well. So yeah, we've put a lot of time and effort and boots on the ground at Badja. Recently we went back and had a look at our multi-element assays, and we confirmed the occurrence of tungsten and the high grades of tungsten in 3 of those assays. Since then, we've gone back to those pulps, and we're testing for element-specific tungsten results, because notoriously the multi-element will underreport the grades of tungsten. So we're kind of pretty excited about what those grades may report to. We've also gone back and said, well, look, if tungsten is coincident with gold here at Badja, we need to relook at the pulps again and go back and do some multi-element initially to see how extensive the tungsten will be. But it's certainly something that it gives us great enthusiasm, particularly in the Monte Cristo prospect and the prospect running north and the contacts running north there, because it sits about 160 metres to 200 metres from the granite intrusion on the west, and so it's got the right sort of hydrothermal or temperature aspects that we need to be focused on. So yeah, we're pretty excited about an emerging tungsten story at Badja for sure.
I mean, again, you know, it's sort of doesn't have that history, but I think Mount Maungain is not too far away from you guys, and the geology, I remember looking at that as well. It's quite similar, and if you're getting that kind of grade of tungsten, and as you said, the obvious source is this granite that you've got there, I would suspect that you probably got a fairly big system or air system that is giving you this kind of mineral. It's just not a gold play anymore. I think to me, that tells me it opens up what could be there, right? And we all know Yalgoo area, all along that part is very, very active, but still fairly underexplored, right? Because I keep telling people, you know, when you look at a plan and a map, it looks like you've got a small box, but when you stand on the ground, that small box is very big. So, you know, when you look at the Monte Cristo, you got that big, massive magnetics, which whatever that could be or have or is bringing along, that's a lot of potential or a lot of possibilities.
Yes, well, there's a very nice flexure in the magnetics at the Monte Cristo prospect, and we've discovered gold in a prospect we're calling Water Tank Hill, just to the south, about 800 metres south of Monte Cristo, and we haven't explored in between Monte Cristo and Water Tank Hill, so it's crying out for some work, and that's why some of our infield geochem survey is looking to try and give us some vectors for drilling. But ultimately, if Monte Cristo and Water Tank Hill are co-joined, then we'll be looking for not only high-grade gold, but also the tungsten story might be extended down to Water Tank Hill.
Yeah, with the extra interest that you've got there now, I think I read your mag's quite broad space. Would you go the next step and maybe get a more narrow sort of narrow lines for your geophysics and get more detail from that? Probably, is that something that you guys would be looking at going down the road?
It's certainly something we've put in the tank or the toolbox, if you like. We've prioritised our expenditures on what will give us, the early return for news flow and success. So I think we've got those. I think we've got the formula right there, Noel. We always comes back to the drill for being the ultimate tester course, and to get the vectors for the best outcomes for the drill is our priority. We've got to be very judicious with shareholders' funds, of course, and we run a very tight ship. Although we're very active and we work hard, but look, that's still something we've looked at. We've considered some airborne mags, some ground mags, and even the drone mags. We have actually discussed those things for sure.
The other project that I quite like is your and strategically placed is your Sunfire project, sort of down at southwest. Obviously, that's the corridor that everybody talks about now, thanks to the discovery of Julimar.
Yes.
Again, I spoke recently on a coffee Samso how I saw the presentation by Charles, and it had this great big corridor running sort of, well, not north-south, but pretty along that line there. And, the Sunfire project is the nickel copper PGE project, as you've got labelled here on your map. Can you share some light for us? I think that's quite an interesting location. I mean, you're not that far from Greenbushes, which is, got the big lithium story, and it was a big tantalum story prior to that. So the right geology in some ways.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I struggle to hold back my excitement about what Sunfire might give us, Noel. It's a project that we have yet to put boots on the ground. We're still going through the processes of with landholders and in getting access, but we should have that sort of settled in the next 3 to 6 months, and we've got some pretty exciting work going to happen there. We are actually situated abutting the Thor discovery, that Venture and Chalice JV, or the Southwest Project they call it.
Okay.
And yes, it does sit on that margin of interest that Chalice have recently broadcast, the margin on the Southwest Craton there. Very, very interesting for us. Our trend, and they've picked up, I think 13 or 20 EM conductors on the Thor, and they've got some mineral sulphides, nickel sulphides from a drill hole at Thor.
They drilled that themselves.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about this because we have parallel trends to that Thor trend, and we're right alongside them. And our Seaton Ross trend has had some historic drilling in there. It's had some very good nickel results, both at 6 metres and 8 metres from surface, but also at depth. We've been able to identify perhaps the indicators for nickel sulphide. So we're very, very excited about Sunfire and what the potential is there. There's a massive copper and nickel anomaly already identified there that's really been truncated by land ownership issues in the past. Planet Mining drilled there in 1970, and since then Shell have had looking for chromite. Creasy was in there as well looking for laterites and sulphide nickel. But look, there's work to be done because fence lines actually determine where work has stopped. And in our early discussions and due diligence with the landowners, we think we have good access to extend those anomalies. So we're pretty excited about the copper, but the copper anomaly is fairly extensive through there. But also the possibility of nickel sulphides is tantalising.
I mean, look, it's whatever Thor was actually given the name Julimar lookalike by Chalice themselves, right? It's sort of encouraging for everybody else in the sector. But if you look at where Julimar is and what has been discovered around Julimar, I get your the fact that you're excited because the potentials of what this could mean is huge. I'm looking at the geophysics here. Interesting, everything has got the right hallmarks. I guess you just got to get boots on the ground and drill bits moving. Yeah,
I think there's some other things that from the Chalice experience, that they're experienced in looking for these things now, and they like the Southwest Project. They talk about it a lot, they talk about the early high platinum results that they got in their discovery of Julimar. Well, it's being repeated down in their Thor project, and we're right alongside it. Yeah. So we think that we're onto a system, and there's magmatic mineralised sulphides quite possible below those anomalies that we're getting in the geochem picture.
And of late we've been hearing. I started this exploration discovery series, which is sitting in episode 1, where John Ronsky talks about these plate margins and where the discoveries are being made. And Alan Kelly gave us a nice little chat about how a lot of his project sits on those plate margins, and I'm looking at where you guys are. I mean, you're sort of on that margin of the U-Gun with the Albany Fraser.
Correct.
And not to say that that's X marks the spot, but it sure is a nice, decent place, right?
Well, yeah, if that's the theory that works. Well, we've got 2 projects that sit on that. We've got the Sunfire project at Bridgetown, and if you extend it to the south, our Viper project at Jerramungup sits within that same 100 kilometre zone that they talk about being highly prospective.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I was going to go towards that, but Yeah, can you tell us more about that Viper project?
Sure. Viper is an interesting project. It sits on a granite and has a Widgymortha dike system sitting to the north. And we came to Viper knowing that there was a historic occurrence of copper in the form of Nettie mine, which was a high-grade mine, a small mine, albeit small. It was grading up to 10% copper. It was mined around about the early 1900s, and there's been very, very little work done in that area. There's been some work by Dominion for gold further to the south and east of us, but in the zone where the Nettie copper mine sits, we discovered two what we think is Proterozoic dikes running in parallel. We did a soils auger drilling program, which has identified anomalism in copper and nickel, and even a small gold anomalism to the east. That provides us with some nice vectors. We just completed an EM survey over those areas, and we've got some coincident anomalism, the geochem anomalism, with some potential conductor, which will give us some really nice vectors to continue our program, our drilling program there.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your geophysics here, and you've done some soils, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, the auger drilling, we went through, given that it's Wheatbelt country and farm country, we drilled, I think, on an average depth of around about 1 metre or 1.5 metres with the auger mounted drill. We put about 150 holes, wide spaced initially, and we're able to clearly pick up that dike system that sits within the granites.
Okay. Look, it's interesting because exploration finds deposits, and you guys seem to have, because I'm noticing, I'm looking at your regional map here now. You've got this Graceland Project, so it sits within that sort of space where I've always said, the next frontier is not where the goldfields used to be. It's always been that Wheatbelt area, and because not a lot of work's been done there, and we know there's mineralisation there. So is Graceland carrying the same thing? Because obviously I can see it's nickel copper PGE again. What's the story there?
Well, just 7 kilometres to the west of Graceland, there's a lateritic nickel discovery called Quicksilver, and we looked at Graceland's when we made the acquisition. It's a bullseye target. We determined that it really needed to be tested. We thought that it's an ultramafic unit that sits below surface. It's blind, and it's picked up in the mags. Some very strong magnetics have come out of it. Totally underexplored. Someone ran some shallow drilling on a fence line some time ago and had a bit of a nickel kick. But since then, we've put an auger program over there, picked up anomalism, geochem anomalism, nickel and copper around the magnetic feature. And since then, we've gone back and just completed an EM, a fixed loop EM study through there over that whole unit. And we've got some really, really interesting targets that need to be further explored. That's the best I can say at the moment, Noel. And we're putting things together on that at the moment with our geophysics.
It's interesting. Look, that Wheatbelt area. I've about 9 months ago to a year now, I was talking to a colleague of mine. We went to uni together, and he's picked up some projects that's sort of sitting around there, literally in the Wheatbelt. And he was telling me what was there historically. Shell did a lot of work in the past. Obviously, now there's more interest in this kind of rock types. Even myself, I was taken to a project probably 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago. Actually, no more. This is before 2010. In near Cruding in the Wheatbelt, and I was walking around. I was looking at all this sort of green-looking rock, But at that time, nobody think much about this. Oh, yeah, it could be a bit of nickel, but you get nickel everywhere, But I think those kind of stuff is more important today. Do you agree with that narrative?
Yeah, look, I think it's demonstrated by the frenzy of activity that's going over the Wheatbelt now. Julimar's helped with the story as well on the west side, but certainly there's a lot of big companies that have picked up tenements all through the Wheatbelt, and on areas which never been, I guess, looked at before. So there's plenty of work to be done. I think there's plenty of interesting things to find undercover in the Wheatbelt, under wheat fields and under farming country.
Yeah, and just looking at your 8 Mile Dam, I mean, going back to more traditional areas of finding stuff. Next to Menzies, nickel sulphide, I know there's a lot of nickel. Ardea has done a lot of work up and down there. In the days of Gutnick, Mount Kersey was doing a heap of drilling around that sort of area. Tell us about that.
Sure. We had Menzies, our Menzies Tenements 8 Mile Dam when we were in Chile. We were interested in some drilling that had been done for diamonds, and the drill chips that were still exposed on surface from that diamond drilling program many years ago showed some nickel, some ultramafics, and we got some nickel kicks. So we thought, well, this deserves some more follow-up. It's a tough environment out there, I have to say. We've got some sand dune country and some 20 metres of cover in places. But we did do an auger program. We ran 3 lines over there, and we were able to get and identify some ultramafic units below surface. And there's still more work for us to do there, Noel. It's in the early stage. But yeah, look, we're also out there looking, as everyone else is at the moment, for the lithium story. It's a granite, mainly a granite unit that sits below that whole tenement area with these stringers of what we see as the ultramafics. So we're looking for all sorts of things out there, but we haven't put a lot of time into Menzies because our other projects have given us a lot of inspiration to go back in terms of priority.
Okay. In terms of where you guys are, as I mentioned before, you guys are 8 million market cap. I guess a lot of punters out there they've looked at or watching this and might have been saying, oh, really prospective, whatever. How's the market at this point in time? I mean, bear in mind we've had some issues over the last 2 weeks. It's getting played out. If you took that out of the picture, how's the market been for you guys? Up and downs, and what are the money guys telling you about what you've got?
Well, the money guys, I think, are very confused. I think you've probably heard that story a lot, Noel, that there hasn't been the normal behaviour of investors for quite some time. And I suppose it's since the introduction of the cryptocurrencies and also the money supply around the world, is an extensive amount of money. And look, it's a very different investor that's investing today. Obviously, we still have our long-term shareholders, but we see people going on our register in the morning and going off in the afternoon quite a lot, almost playing the crypto game with our currency. It hasn't done a lot of favours for us. The other problem, of course, is that gold's just not in vogue, surprisingly. And even if we do talk about the last 2 weeks, it got a little bit of a kick, yeah, and it got a kick for the producers, of course, because the price of gold going up. But for the explorers, I think we all took a bit of a tanking, and our share price in the last week or so it's just been awful. But we know that we're undervalued, and a story will come through our hard work and our exploration will change the picture dramatically, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at all these things just the last few days, and I think for those guys who sort of thought they missed out in the 2020 rush and the 21 more rushed, probably should look at this as a time to pick up the ones that they thought they missed out on. I think this is a good hiatus to this market. I don't think this hiatus is going to go backwards, personally. There's too many factors that will push commodities up. And, goals and inflation thing. Then you got the EV stuff, and you've got the rebuilding of what's not happened for the last 2 years. But when I look at something like this, one of the keys, cash. I mean, what's your cash position now?
I think we reported our last one's at 1.7, so we've still got a reasonable amount of cash for the plans that we have in place, Noel, for sure. Yeah. Look, I think just going back on what you said, one of the things that Emu has done is we play the long game as well. I think it's important to stay focused on those minerals that we think are important, the strategic minerals, strategic time, copper, nickel, with the evolving EV markets. And of course gold. I mean, it's in our veins at Emu, the gold story. So we've stayed with that. We can be distracted by looking for some lithium somewhere, and I think a lot of companies have done that and been successful recently on the cycle. But we think that these things can be cyclical as well. But to play the long game's been important for us.
Yeah, I always believe long games. I mean, this game, if you found the deposit today, it's not going to happen within 2-3 years in most projects anyway.
Sure.
Very few would happen. But look, I can't help but when I go back and look at your Badja project, and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at regionally with all the greenstones, you sit in sort of like a spanner bar, where you got the Golden Grove guys splitting up, and then north of you it splits out and hits Yalgoo and things like that.
Yeah.
There definitely is something there, and really I want to go back to it because I really think that the fact that you got tungsten in that capacity makes it different to where it was before.
Yes.
As a gold project, as your typical Yalgoo play, or a small play in that sense, but because Golden Grove is a base metal play. It's been around for ages. Now you've got tungsten. There must be you guys must be quietly thinking, hey, maybe we got something different to the day before you realise you got the tungsten, right?
Yeah. Well, we've always realised that there's a base metal trend that sits a little bit to the east of the contacts that we've been exploring for gold. Those geophysics, the mags particularly, where we've looked at the contact with the BIFs, and we've been able to find the gold, and it's everywhere we've drilled. We've repeated the story, but we've always realised that a little bit to the east of it sits the base metal trend, of which Golden Grove would sit. So we've still to test some of those targets in our tenements. We'd probably like a little bit more than what we've got, but there's certainly some areas that definitely need some work. And we need to get some vectors on some of that base metal trend. But tungsten, tungsten might be the new story for us. I mean, it's been, as you say, Malgine has a story, and it's on the same structure. So there's really no reason why that won't repeat where we are. And we've certainly got some tantalising results early, which we need to dig down a little bit deeper. So. Yeah.
Oh mate, I'm looking at your grades. I think it's you've got something there, and further north of you, I think there's, forget the name of the prospect. They had similar grades too. There were 0.1, 0.2s, not 0.2, maybe 0.1 to 0.1 to 0.2s, which is really good grades.
Yeah, and I suspect ours will be higher than that because we haven't done the element specific testing for tungsten.
Yeah, I think
that
so.
Notoriously repeating low numbers that you get from the multi-element. We're hopeful that could be 2 or 3 times higher. We'll know soon enough when the assays come through, and that's our problem. We've got to wait a long time for assay results at the moment too, Noel.
Yeah, I guess that's the industry issues now. Is that it takes a while to get all this to happen, but it's good to wait for things that you think will be positive. It's a different story if you sat there and realising that all we're going to get back is not that great. So,
yes.
Look, so going forward for Emu, I mean, there's always, everybody wants to know what's the plan and how you guys are going to move forward in the next 6-12 months.
Yeah.
Can you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So look, we've still got work to start at Sunfire, and as I mentioned earlier, we're very, very enthusiastic about our work there. We're just really excited, to be honest. And the Badja story's changed. I mean, we've still got the gold, and we're still exploring for gold. And the great thing is where we're drilling for gold, we're now going to be looking for tungsten as well. So I think there's an emerging story there. It's almost like a new project or a new look at an old project. So, or an older project. We've only had it 18 months, but the 18 kilometres of drilling that we've done there makes it a little bit older. But look, the tungsten story there's a new one. And look, we think we're going to have some great results from our EM program at both Viper and Graceland. So we've got 4 projects that we're working on that are all showing possibilities of being something important and significant.
I agree. I think I like where you guys are located. I like the Sunfire positioning. Viper's definitely different. We're on Ravensthorpe's, that's where we had a Mount Cat, and I think there's even an iron ore. There's definitely nickel because you got the Ravensthorpe nickel thing.
Yes, that's right.
And then further south of that, you've got the I think it's called Trilogy. It's a what do you call a multi metal polymetallic project. So it's really endowed in the sense that there's something cooking over there. So again, now that I've it's along that margin. So yeah, the being on that margin definitely has its pluses today. And I remember talking to somebody and they said, it's amazing how I think it was Ian Warland from Cooper Metals. It's amazing how where geophysics is today to be so detailed, and it's technology on that side has improved so much to give that. So
well, I mean, that's our story at Sunfire, to be honest. I mean, in 1970 they were drilling and made these hits, and we're talking 50 years later. The technology's changed considerably, especially the geophysics. Some of the surveying techniques, the modern techniques now that we're going to be using at Sunfire, make it extraordinarily exciting.
Yeah. Well, look, it's a good story. I think I like it. 8 million market cap. Can't get any cheaper than that. In that sense for a punter. You've got some good prospects. I think a few little tweaks and suddenly things may change, right?
Yeah. Look, I think we're due for a step change with our share price, and it's only going to take one of those projects to fire. I've got the confidence that all of them have a chance, a good chance, but it's only going to take one that'll turn the wheel.
Oh look, I mean there are companies like Venture. The very first time I spoke to them, although they're a bit more advanced in some of the projects, but some of the other projects are probably at the same level in a sense. And I looked at it. I thought, you got so many projects, but every one of them's got that ability to just turn over from one discovery or a drill hole, because the prospectivity is there, right? You get and as a guy has said before, good geology always ends up with good results. It's just a case of having that ability to find it, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Look, Doc, I remember the first time we met and then looked at your projects. I must say that uneducatedly I look at it it's a bit scattered, but I think now that I've looked at it a bit more and concise, I can see the organised madness, I guess, in that sense. But look, Doug, thank you for giving us time. I mean, it's fantastic. I think it's a good story. It's for an investment platform, as we all want to look for getting on the cheap level. It looks good. It looks, I encourage guys to do your research and reach out to Doug. I mean,
for sure,
and definitely understand the projects a bit more. It is worth doing a bit more sort of researching, I guess, in that sense. Before we go, Doug, we've sort of teamed up with Florence Drummond and the Indigenous Women in Mining Resource, and they've given us packets of coffee that we give to guests. So here's a couple of packets for you to
thank you very much, Noel. I appreciate it. They'll be much enjoyed. Thank you very much indeed.
And again, thanks to Florence and the team for providing that. But look, Doug, thank you. I know it's early stage work and everything else, but I think these are the kind of stories that Samso likes to catch early and then follow the journey and sort of see it develop, right? And then we can turn around and say, I told you so.
Yes, yeah. I think you've got the Midas touch, Noel. So let's hope it works for us.
Yeah.
But look, the smart people have already got the investment in Emu. I think that if we can get a little bit more excitement there from the discussions that I had with you and the opportunity to tell our story, that's fantastic.
All right. Okay. Thank you. We'll catch up again.
Thanks, Noel. Cheers.